to another exciting episode of How Did You Show. Today, I have a very fascinating and a very amazing guest with me on the show. She is a public speaker, podcaster, mindset coach, and the managing director of a letting and management company. And on top of everything, she is a mother of 5 amazing, wonderful girls. And for those who don't know, our wonderful Traci Cornelius. Hello, Traci.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on here, and I'm really honoured to be on your podcast. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I feel very honoured that you came on the show. You, as I said in your introduction, you are a very, very inspiring person. You are a very, very hardworking person. You are full-time mom of 5 and running a business and social media. You're a social media queen and podcast and public speaker. There's so much to learn from you. I really can't wait to share your story a little bit with the listeners. So, for those who don't know Traci, is there anything else you would like to add compared to from what I said about you? Is there anything you would like to add? Tell us a little bit more about you, where you're from, perhaps, or what you like doing.
Yeah, so I'm born and bred in Devon, but I have lived in many places throughout the UK. I now currently live in Brixham in Devon. I would say that for the majority of my life I've been self-employed. So I've run businesses since before the age of 20, and then predominantly run businesses throughout. Even when I've been employed, I've still run businesses. And I think that that's been a big part of how I've got to where I am today. But also, the reason for running a business in the first place didn't come from any desire for wanting to run a business. It came from a need to be able to bring in money, and having a real struggle with having a partner that then worked away all the time. So he was a pilot and would be away for like 2 weeks at a time. Well, actually minimum of 2 weeks at a time, sometimes 3 months at a time. And having a daughter who was just coming up into a starting school, and like trying to find that balance of a job that would work around then what were going to be new school hours and not having a support network was actually really challenging. And I remember like trying to search, and I don't think it was Google. I think this is pre-Google days, but I was trying to search for different ways of being able to bring in money. And I remember this self-employment idea came up. I didn't really know anything about it. Knew nothing about self-employment at that point in time. So I did probably what many people do when they are first looking to get something, and I went into a multi-level marketing company, and it was a horrendous experience. I lost so much money, like really lost so much money, and not actually because of the multi-level marketing company in itself. It was because of people that I kind of trusted and this like marketing route that I'd gone down. But what it did do is it then made me think I was never going to be self-employed again. But later on, when you do a lot of reflection and you realize that actually you're also responsible for the mistakes or the choices that you've made. And I'm very reflective now. When I look back on that, it taught me so much. And the grounding of that also did. I suppose the challenge that I had when I was in business when I was younger is I like to say that I was very evolutionary. So revolutionary. So I would basically go, oh well, I've tried this and then it didn't work, so I'm not doing that again and not doing anything associated with that again. And then I've tried this and that's not worked, so I'm never doing that again. Whereas the older that I've got, and maybe more wiser I've got slightly, I've become a lot more evolutionary of realizing it's not everything that didn't work. There were just certain sections of it excuse me, and then how I've managed to then extract what really has worked and improve on it to then move it into the next business. So yeah, so basically pretty much a serial entrepreneur is probably what I would say.
Wow, running a business since before you were 20. That's amazing. So
Yeah,
you always had it in you. You always had it in you.
yeah, and I also helped other people set up business as well, which is really fascinating. Even coming up with the concept of company names, and a lot of what people teach you in business today, I instinctively did when I was younger, and that was quite good to know. But it's really strange. Just because you know something doesn't mean to say you always do it. And I find this really fascinating about human beings, but even myself, when I look and I think, well, I know to do that, so why don't I? Because I wouldn't say that there's much that I maybe learned over the years that's drastically changed something. There wasn't like this one nugget of information that made a big difference. I would say that a lot of it I knew, and then I've just fine-tuned along the way. But it's about doing things consistently, and it still surprises me even now, even when I don't do some of those things consistently. So I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but yeah, I do find that fascinating about human nature.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, human nature is fascinating in many ways.
It is, and your mindset. And I know that we're going to talk about mindset quite a lot in this episode, but your brain is like your best friend, but that also can be your worst enemy, and it's almost like a misguided best friend. You know, the person that wants to keep you so safe, that they try and stop you from taking any kind of risks, or really looking outside of yourself. And your brain, you kind of sometimes will have this battle between the fact that you know that you need change and that you know that you need to do something, but your brain wants to keep you safe. So it's kind of like trying to stop you from doing this, and it's being able to try and get over that hurdle to get to the other side. But that can be an uphill struggle for many people. And what will happen is that I like to think your brain is a little bit like a computer. It runs on so many different programs. You've got a money program, you've got a relationship program, you've got all of these different things, but the programming didn't come from you. The programming came from everybody else that helped you to grow up, to the people that were of influence of you. And so if there is like a discord between what their experience was and the programming that they've given you to the outcome that you really want, you'll always self-sabotage it until you can recognize that it's the programming that's incorrect and you need to rewrite it. And that's why we have these like human nature kind of almost things that we do, and then we're like, but we wanted to be over here, and why did I just go and take the wrong route when I knew that I wanted to be there? And it can get quite frustrating. But if you can understand the basics as to how that's happening, why that's happening, and start really knowing yourself and recognizing when you're falling into that pattern, you can do something about it, which is why awareness is the first part to any of it. And I find it interesting because I feel that sometimes we're moving further and further away from actually knowing ourselves. We've got so much input coming in, and we look to other people for inspiration and answers. But then instead of using it as inspiration and a way to guide us, we look at it as a way to be. And you can't be someone else. You can only ever be yourself. We just need to help the programming, the writing of that program, help you to get to where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just having a plan, having a clear visions, having yeah, there's a lot linked to this topic, and I'm sure we will get there. Can I just ask you first, Traci, why did you how did you start in properties, and why property? What brought you to that before we go with a mindset and your businesses, etc.?
Yeah, so at the time, it's a really good question. At the time that I started to get involved or meet more people that were involved in property, I was doing a lot of my business mentoring and mindset coaching, and I came across a company that at the time was called Unlimited Success. So Progressive Property had two arms to their business. They had Unlimited Success, which was the business side, and they had Progressive Property. So of course I'd gone in the business side of things, not having any association with property, but a number of people that were coming to those business courses had obviously been on some of the property courses. So I was meeting a lot of people that were doing really well and being really successful in business and saying that they were in property. And I probably, like many other people, were like, how are you doing that? I know that you're not like a millionaire. Like, how is that possible? And so I started to be open to a little bit more education as far as property was concerned. And I was really fascinated with that. And then I went and did a speaking course, and it's a week's course, really intensive. And I had one of probably the biggest breakthroughs. So I had a childhood where the very people that you're meant to be able to trust were the people that I couldn't trust at all. And so there were so many different things that I kind of grew up believing about myself, and the restrictions and thinking that I wasn't a good person, and like all of these kind of like baggage things that had happened in my programming, if you like. And so this speaker training that I'd gone through, I'd had this like massive breakthrough, and I was ecstatic, because I've done so many different things throughout my career. I've done a lot of things on mindset. I've done a lot of different healing modalities. I trained in EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and I had a practice for a while. And so there's a lot of different things that I had actually already done up until that point. And on the way home, it's like a 5-hour journey, you know, because you've been there. It's a long drive. And I was buzzing, you know, when you're just so excited about something that you're just like, time just seems to evaporate. I remember pulling over to a service station and calling home just to make sure that the girls were okay and that Mark was okay. And when I did that, it really felt like he was trying to get me off the phone. And I just, you know, when you're in just like that kind of buzzy mood that nothing's going to bring you down. So I just thought, oh, maybe he just wants me to get back, because if I leave Devon, he practically breaks out in hives, you know. So get home, I think it's around about 11:30 by that time. I walk through the door, I am still buzzing.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and just says to me, he says, "Oh God, you look so happy." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "It's been amazing." And I was like, all bouncy, like a little bit like Tigger. And he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I was like, "What's up with you?" He's like, "No, I'm really sorry, but your brother's passed away." And I remember literally pushing him away from me and just thinking, that's not, and I do remember going, "That's not funny." And looking at his face, and you know, when you have that, like you're on such a major high that it takes your brain a little bit of a while to kind of comprehend things. I'm in my head, I'm thinking, that's not funny. And I'm looking at his face thinking, crap, it's really serious. And he's not joking. And yeah, my brother was 2 years younger than me. And at the time, his 2 youngest children were ages 3 and 6. So they were same ages as 2 of our children. And it hit me so hard. Yeah, and it also hit me really hard because my ex-boyfriend also passed away in his sleep. And so a lot of the things that I was feeling, probably because of Nick, also came kind of rushing in with the passing of my brother. And at the time, we just knew that my brother passed away in his sleep. That was it. He hadn't got any health conditions or anything else like that. So it was a major shock. But what that experience did do is it really made me look, and this whole I suppose new level of fear set in to a certain extent, because when I looked at his children and then I looked at my children, I was thinking, how on earth are we going to try and keep my brother's memory alive? Because the youngest one at 3, they're not going to remember. And I remember looking at Soraya thinking, wow, if that was me, you wouldn't remember all the things that I've done with you. You wouldn't remember all the fun, the bedtime stories, the hugs. You wouldn't have known what I've tried to do to create stuff for the family. And that's when I started to think about time in a completely different way, really. Every business that I'd run previously, maybe bar the cleaning business, needed me at the helm. It was always by me oriented, like the business mentoring and coaching. I've got a team of people, but I'm still the person that's doing the mentoring. And I'm still the person that's doing the coaching. And if I don't do the mentoring and the coaching, guess what? We don't get paid. And other businesses were very similar. So I started looking at this, and I started looking about what security had we created in those businesses. I'd been paid really well, and I'd spent money really well. I hadn't been quite so good on the saving, the creating assets, because my money programming wasn't programmed that way. Absolutely. Excuse me. And so, yeah, I looked at everything very differently. And this is when I started looking at property. I'd always loved property. I'd had done certain things in property previously, like I'd done up a property with my ex-boyfriend, but it was still his property. So I hadn't done it on like a professional level. And I thought, well, this would be a really good way for us to be able to build assets instead of just having liabilities, creating more security. And property is not hands off. I know that some people like to say that it is. It really isn't. But in comparison to some other businesses, you can become more hands off. And so as we kind of progress through this journey, if you like, I knew that that's what it would do. So that's how I got started. It was more from almost like a tragedy that was looking at life in a very, very different way, and what I was going to create for my children as well as ourselves, and the experiences that we wanted to have. And as much as nobody wants anyone to pass away, I'm kind of happy that I've taken that direction.
It's like, where's the expression is like, when the life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Yes.
It's just the way how you look at things. It's like, obviously it's sad. It's a sad thing to happen, and obviously no one can be happy. That's nothing to be happy about. But no. You have to continue life then. And if you look at the other ways, or there's other ways of looking at it, as you said, and well, it kind of opened up my eyes a bit more, or it showed me, it's so yeah, this, you don't want to say that there's positive and negatives, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
But there is, and I know what you're saying, and as human beings, we feel like we shouldn't make something happy out of something sad. We kind of feel like that that there's something wrong in doing that, but actually, I think there's something so right in doing that. Yes, it's really hard. I've dealt with a lot of people that have had grief. I've obviously dealt with a lot of grief myself, and sometimes the challenge can be that you get so stuck in that grief that you forget to live. But the people that have passed would never want you, like, if they are looking down, like a lot of spiritual things say that they do, if they are, the last thing that they're going to want to do is go, actually, what I'd really like you to do is be in complete and utter grief and not be able to live and be happy for another day of your life. That's never going to happen. And so you do. And one of the things that I'm really keen to do is that I knew that Sam's now left with 2 children, and trying to manage all of that. My brother, they didn't own their own house. My brother didn't have savings or whatever. And a driving factor for me is for us to be able to give Sam her own house. So then she's got like complete security, and security for my niece and nephew. And there isn't any other way that I would be able to do that if I wasn't in property, as far as I can see right now. So yeah, so there are a number of different things. We just then took that idea, and boy, did we run with it. We really ran with it and took a number of different avenues. But I think that's the business part in me, of like making sure then that we were going to have multiple streams of income from it. But how do we make this kind of like triage of way of making sure that we're keeping as much in-house as possible?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so now I understand how you got to property and why you got to property. And can you maybe share with us what is your like the current strategies, what you guys do, what you do in property?
Yes. So we have an investment company, so we do property trading. That's where we're sourcing properties, because no matter what you're doing in property, you're always sourcing properties. So we wanted to make sure that if we weren't in a position to be able to take on a property deal, that we were still basically making sure that, one, we could pass that on to someone else and earn from it, but also helping someone else in their business that doesn't have the time. So it's like a win-win situation. So we do property trading. We also have a lettings and management company. That one is probably at the most of the forefront at this moment in time. So I took at this moment in time, you don't have to be qualified to be a lettings and management company, but I did take the qualification in the throes of taking the next level of a qualification. We did all of the compliance and everything else that goes along with that. And that one I've found a lot of fun. It's quite hard when you're diving into the legal aspect of it. There's so much. I genuinely felt like I was taking a law degree. But it has been a lot of fun, and it also has taught us a lot of things. And then we have a holding company, so that's where our properties then sit. So we've got like this triage. So if we're sourcing a property, buying a property, managing a property, it can all stay in-house, but we also do it for other people.
Amazing, fantastic. And do you source and do you invest in Torbay or other areas as well?
So our areas are mainly Torbay and Exeter. Torbay specifically because that's where we are local, and that's also where Mark is local. So Mark is the other director of the company. He was previously a carpenter. He's been a damp roofer. He's done a lot on property management, but more from like the building and construction side of things. And you know what you internally put in it. I'm more of the business, front facing, tell you how to make something pretty type of thing. I'll look at a property and I go, oh, it'd be really good if you could do this, and then he'll be like, that's a low bearing wall, and you can, you know, those types of things. So good combination, because I couldn't do what he does. But yeah, mainly Torbay and Exeter. Exeter is very close to my heart. No matter wherever I've lived in the UK, I've always come back to Exeter city centre for, it's just, you know, Exeter city centre is very different to many other cities. It is a big city, but it's still got that kind of very close-knit feel, if you like, and it's such a pretty city as well. It's like, it really is beautiful, and there's some amazing history there too.
Yeah, I need to go and spend some time in Exeter because I moved to Torbay just over a year ago, and
Yeah.
let's face it, most of the time we've been in lockdown. So
Yeah.
like, if you think about it, so I actually haven't really spent any time in Exeter. I've been there for a couple of viewings and things like that, but I actually don't know Exeter at all. But to be fair, lately I've been talking to a few people and I heard beautiful things about Exeter, thinking, and that made me think. I was like, why I haven't go to Exeter more often? And I thought, lockdown. Like,
yeah, that would be a reason why. Yeah. Exeter, it's stunning. It's where so when I was younger and we'd go clubbing, it would either be Taunton or Exeter, and predominantly be Exeter. So yeah, there's so many places in that I know. It's just beautiful, really beautiful place.
fantastic. Yeah, I'll take that on board. And when we are not in a lockdown.
Yeah, you take a visit. There's really good investment opportunities there. I mean, Exeter's becoming, or it was becoming pre-lockdown, one of the largest growing cities in Exeter, in the UK.
Yeah, I've been reading as well a lot about the area. That's why I started viewings there, and then things went wrong. But yeah,
Then we all stayed inside.
exactly. But at least because at least you know the area. So even if you're in a lockdown and you're doing, you're searching properties online or something, you know the areas better. For me, I don't at all. So yeah, for me, I need to kind of like have a look first. Have a look. Getting to know.
Yeah.
No,
Go and explore.
Exactly. All right. So, Tracy, as we picked for today, like the main question for the episode is because of all the experience you have and all the things you are juggling, right? Juggling, yeah.
Yeah.
So we thought that your main question today will be, so how to overcome authenticity and why people don't yet should be running their property company as a proper business.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, first of all, overcoming adversity. We are all going to have times in our businesses, in our property journeys, in life in general, that life is going to throw a complete and utter curveball that we weren't ready for. It might be at a time when things were going really well, or it might even be times when things have been pretty crap and they've just got even worse. And it's, how do you pick yourself up over that? And if there's anything that people have mentioned to me more than anything else, it's just how I keep going. Most people say, well, nothing gets you down. Of course it does. I'm a human being. It really does get me down, but it doesn't stop me. And there's a big difference between being able to look at life and see what it's thrown at you. And one of the very first things that I try to do is I try to look for the lesson that's involved in that. And that can sometimes be quite challenging, because when you're in a moment when it's raw, when it's painful, it's quite hard to be observational. And you have to be what I call a neutral observer. So a neutral observer is almost when you stand outside of yourself and you look in on the situation, because it's easier to do that than when you're trying to do it internally, when you're in pain, or if you're in frustration or anger or that type of thing, because that will block any logic, reason. Yeah. Like, you can't think of solutions when you're in that situation. So you have to become a neutral observer. And when you become a neutral observer and you're looking in, what you're looking for is, where was the lesson involved, and was there anything that you did that you could have possibly have done different? Now here's where this can sometimes get people's back up, because they'll be like, yeah, but I didn't do anything, it was such and such that did this to me, and I couldn't have done anything. And that's it could be completely and utterly true. But if you step back and become the neutral observer, what you can also look is that, did you pay attention to your gut instinct when you knew that you shouldn't have got in business with that person, or you shouldn't have taken on that tenant, or you shouldn't have kind of taken that, like whatever that was, did you pay attention? Or did you override that at the time because you thought that it was going to be okay, or whatever that would happen to be? Or was it the fact that you'd rushed into the situation and didn't do any due diligence? Like, these are just some kind of examples. There is always a lesson for us to learn if we take responsibility for it. But taking responsibility is hard, man, because you got to look at you and go, damn, this crappy thing happened. And part of that is because of something that I've done. But if you do that, you then become in control. So what people will often do is, when something's gone wrong, is that they will externalize, they'll push everything aside, and it will be like it's because of someone else. But you don't realize that if you do that, you're giving away all of your power. You're basically saying, nothing of this is to do with me, and so therefore I can't fix it. Whereas if you look at any part of the responsibility that you may have had to do with it, suddenly you've got all the power. And this is why I said, first of all, like, understanding what's kind of happened is like the first step. So you look at it, you find out your responsibility, you take that power on yourself, and you're like, right, okay, I might have messed up on that bit, or I trusted too much, or like, I need to learn who to trust, who not to trust, whatever that might happen to be, because this works the same for relationships, like work, life in general, but as well as your kind of property journey, any deals that you might have had, any tradespeople that you might have got involved with, whatever that happens to be. Look at your responsibility, take that power, and that's when you can start looking and go, right, what am I going to do differently? What am I going to do to make this right? How am I going to make this happen now? The worst thing that you can do is think that you don't have the solution, because everybody does. Everybody has a solution. Now, sometimes it might be a situation that feels so raw that trying to even think just gives yourself a headache. And if that happens, the best thing to do is nothing. Sometimes if we have a really challenging situation, and especially if there's anger involved, trying to rush the solution usually means that you vent that anger on other people, and that can make a worse situation. So at times where I haven't got an answer, I literally do nothing. I take myself away from the situation. I wait until I can start to think clearly. And I think that's sometimes the biggest difference. Sometimes you can make a mistake, but then your reaction makes a further mistake, and it becomes a snowball effect. So these are all kind of little tools that you can have in your kind of armory, just to help you to be better. Now, sometimes there are also going to be times where that adversity creates such a raw emotion, like maybe it is a loss, that you're going to need some time, and you need to allow yourself to have that time. You need to allow yourself to be able to grieve properly. There are also some people, and I used to be like this all the time would be the person that would just be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna get through it. But the problem is you don't deal with it, so all that happens is it gets buried. And you can bet your bottom dollar that at some point in time that is going to rear its ugly head at the wrong time for you. So pushing emotions down and not dealing with them actually just creates like this almost like packing effect, and at some point in time that's going to blow like a volcano. So and I've done that.
Oh yeah, we all did. It's my friend. I'm not gonna say it correctly, but I'm gonna try because I love it so much. His phrase is that when you have anger, he said you need to let those little crazies out, otherwise
Yes.
you would just explode. And I think he called them little crazies. And it's
Yeah.
just sometimes when you feel like you want to just spill out something or just be a little bit of he said do it, because otherwise you're just gonna hold, and then you just explode in a way you don't want to. So he said that, yeah, to let those crazies out,
Yes.
those little crazies, is so important.
It is, and it is very important, because otherwise you are out of control. When you're doing that, it doesn't feel great, but you're still in control of it. It doesn't control you. But if you have too much anger, that anger then becomes like an entity in itself, and then that's when you say things, do things that you really hadn't intended. And apologizing for that type of thing is really hard afterwards. People can be very forgiving, but one of the things that I do with my children, because children can often have that they would be very reactional, and we did this experiment where we took them outside and we let go of a glass, and so the glass smashes, and then you say to them, say sorry to the glass. So they say sorry to the glass, and you say, did it mend the glass? And they say no. And you say, well, that's what happens when you do things to other people. They may forgive you, but there's a part of it that's always going to be broken. It's never going to go back to being the same way. And we're like that as human beings, yeah. And so if you don't let it out all the time, you'll be too broken to kind of put it all back together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
So I think all of us are going to have situations of coming over adversity. The first part is become the neutral observer. The second part is looking at where your responsibility, or where there's a part of responsibility in that for you. The third part then is trying to come up with a solution of how you're going to then move forward, because stopping is not an option for you. If you have a dream, if you have an ambition, if you have a goal that you are going towards, there is nothing that should be bigger than you, or bigger than you trying to get to that. And unfortunately, what we'll often do is we'll almost talk ourselves out of it, and then it will stop it. And we don't really want that to happen. And then if they are massive, really hard emotional parts, give yourself that time, and feel those emotions. The hard part is that we don't want to, because it hurts too much, and that's when our brain, like that like misguided best friend, I don't want you to be hurt, so let's like divert your attention. But the diversion doesn't heal you. Dealing with things heals you. And if you've got something as tragic as a loss, for example, healing takes time, and there's not going to be one magic thing that can make that okay, because you're going to feel the loss of missing that person. By that person suddenly coming back into your life, which unfortunately is not going to happen, like nothing is going to make that situation better. You have to try and find those moments to be able to for you to keep living, so that you don't become stuck.
It is very much a lot. Everything is linked with a mindset, isn't it? So you talk about business, or how to deal with grief, or a lot, overwhelmed with in the personal life with the business, and anything else. Because we talk about business, but that's why I keep going back to it. But with anything, it's the mindset is the key, isn't it? And people saying that you want to have a bulletproof mindset. That's sort of the phrase people saying, that the bulletproof mindset for anything. And what you're describing, it's basically the ways to get there. So if something bad happens to you, yes, allow the time to deal with it, allow the time to be sad and all that, because we are human beings. We feel all the emotions, from being sad and happy and jealous and angry and all sorts of emotions we feel, but it's just the way how we deal with them. So
Yeah.
having the right strong mindset, it doesn't happen like this. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen after reading one book like The Secret, or I don't know, any mindset books. Yeah, it's something takes time. Some people can be working on their mindset, well, all your life. You basically work.
You're always going to be working on it, you know, because it's like a muscle. If you want it to be strong, you have to keep working on it. But here's the thing: every single day you have new input, whether it's news that's just kind of happened, whether you meet someone new, whether you have a new experience. So you are changing every single day. The worst thing that people can say, in my mind, is when people go, "Oh, it's like they haven't changed a bit," or when they try to turn around to you and go, "Well, I don't want to be friends with you anymore because you've just changed." Congratulations, yes, you have, because that is what you are meant to do as a human being. Nothing is meant to stay the same. The hard part is for the people that have a mindset that want everything to stay the same.
Yes.
Life becomes very challenging for them, because that's impossible. People around you will change. In relationships, the biggest challenge that you'll have is that at some point in time, one of you will be progressing in a way that the other one isn't. And it's how do you navigate that dynamic until you're both back onto the same pathway again. So you might have someone that's going on a self-development journey, for example, and they get so enamored with it and so excited about the changes that they see that they want to bring everybody else with them. But not everybody is at that time. Exactly. They're not ready for that information. They're not open to that information. So there'll be a discord. And it's how you weather that part when that's happening. But change is inevitable. So your mindset is something that you're always having to work on. People would say to me all the time, well, you know, you being a mindset coach, it's okay for you. I'm not immune from having down days, from feeling slightly depressed, from feeling like it's all going wrong, that I'm not good enough. I'm not immune from any of those types of things at all. I have them regularly. What I do have, though, is a lot of different tools in my toolbox that I don't stay in that state. And there's the big difference, is recognizing that it happens, but you don't have to stay there. I would much rather stay in a much better destination, which is where I'm heading, than being pulled down to where somewhere where it's not helping me progress at all. And so that's what we're helping people to do. Yeah.
You know what I really love, as you said, when you were talking about the changes. So this is very interesting. I read somewhere, someone was giving this, that mindset was the topic. And I can't remember who that was, but I never forget the sentence when she said old friend told her that, oh, you've changed, but like in a negative way. They told her, and she said,
yeah,
thank you, I worked really hard on that. And I was like, that's amazing. I love the way how she looked at it. It was like, she actually smiled and she was like, oh, thank you, I worked really hard.
yes,
I worked really hard not to stay the same person I was 20 years ago when we were hanging around after school, you know, sneaking up a cigarette or something like that. Yeah, I am,
yeah,
for example, strong-minded, business-minded and all that. Thank you very much. I worked really hard on that. And
exactly.
yeah, I loved it. And there's also, obviously, you can have people who change to not better, for example, but that's not
Yes.
what we're talking about when you're working on your mindset, when you're changing yourself to be someone you want to be. Now,
Yeah.
I found it interesting as well. You have different type of people around you. Those people
Yes.
who I just mentioned, that example that, oh, you've changed, with the negative sort of comment. And then you have people who see that you've changed. They are not like you, but they love you as you are. And I have a
Yes.
example of my best friend, Julia. She's not going to watch this. She's not into property. So I know. I got a semester go anyway. So we've been friends for over 10 years now. And 10 years ago, I wasn't even 20. And I was 20 and I was a very different person. And I've changed a lot, but we are still best friends. And she lives with me at the moment. because of the COVID. When the COVID started, we invited her to live with us because she lived alone and we didn't know how long the lockdown's going to be. So we live together now. And yeah, and it's like she loves me more than ever before. And isn't that just amazing that you just stay who you are and don't just try to be someone who you think that other people want you to be, or stay same people
absolutely
years ago. Just don't make anything like that stop you. Just be yourself, and the true friends will stay true friends, and who's not going to stay your friends will just shows you who they really are and then they're meant to be in your life, and move on.
A lot of the times when there's more adversity between friendships or family, and especially when it comes to the you've changed part, the fear is, and it's an internal, it's not recognized. There's a difference between the subconscious and the conscious. So your conscious brain, which is the front part of the brain, is all things that you're remembering right now, and the subconscious is all your programming. Now, you'll often have people that won't want you to change, and it's not because they don't like you. It's because for them, the change is so scary because it becomes like a mirror. It means that if you've changed, then they had the possibility of changing, but they didn't take it. And if you've got out of poverty, for example, let's say that you've grown up with a family that was always on the breadline, that really couldn't afford very much, and you had friends that, you know, their parents were very wealthy, and so this part came up. And then you've got other friends or family members that when you've started to do really well and you're financially well off, in particular, money seems to be a really big motivator for a lot of people, then they criticize you for that, or you must have done something wrong, or you must have swindled somebody to get that, you know, that kind of mindset. It's because the fear is if you've managed to do it, then they had the same opportunity and they haven't. And that's when you'll often hear people say things like, well, it's all right for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's like a classic one. And I'll have still people that will do that for me, even on like a mindset level. Well, it's all right for you. But there's like many very challenging situations that I've been in, that if people knew the kind of background of the story, like, no, it's not it's all right for me situation. It's a choice. And that choice is to not be defined by that situation or the opinions that those people wanted to put on me. I define and carve out my own journey. It's not defined by another person. Interestingly, you can take a lot of the inspiration from those people, whether it's been negative or positive, because my whole childhood I grew up thinking I don't want to be like that person. I'm not going to do that when I am old enough to be able to have interactions with people and that type of thing. Like, I even remember being as young as 5 looking and going, that's not me, and I'm not going to be like that. I think we all have this choice as to whether we experience something negative, but we then decide that that's not how we want to be, and we can experience something positive and decide that is how we want to be. So you can see things from both angles, but everything will come down to choice. And at some point in time, you may even have to make a really hard choice, which basically says, I'm going to cut those people out of my life now. And especially when it comes to family, people are like, oh, I can't kind of do that. I have a slightly different view, but then I've also had a very different upbringing. So, but I would often say, if you were to meet this person on the street and you were to meet them as a person, if you don't like them as a person, then don't keep them in your life, whether they are family or not. Because what will end up happening is there'll always be this mass discord for you. If you like them as a person, whether they agree with what you're doing or not, keep them in your life. Just don't keep trying to make them like you, because that's the other part that we will often do as human beings, is we find something that's working, and then because we're so happy and thrilled about it and it's working for us, we want to do that for everybody else because we want them to have the same transition and in life. But it doesn't work that way. You can't make that for someone else. And even if they did follow the same pathway as you, it might not have the same result because they're not as passionate about it as you. So there's the two things, is there's making sure that you like that person, as a human being, what they stand for, what their values are, how they treat people. If you are connected with that, great. if you are connected in a way but they don't agree with you, stop bringing it up. Stop trying to rub that into them, because then you become part of the problem. I do think that there needs to be a lot more acceptance and understanding of people, and come to the mutual ground, come to the part where you're just meeting someone, you're not trying to get something out of them, and you're also not trying to give something to them that they don't want.
Very true, very true. Oh, yeah. So yeah, everything is just up there, as we said. Mindset is the base for everything. So I'd say that one thing for anyone can learn so far from, what the message is being said here is just really work on your mindset, no matter what you're trying to do or deal with or achieve, or in anything, isn't it? Like, especially like this is you are a businesswoman and you are a mother and you are a podcaster and coach, and there's so much you do. It's like, if you wouldn't work on your mindset, that's just for anybody else as well. Yeah, if you don't work on your mindset, how else would you manage to deal with all that? It's social media. Just the social media on its own, when you're using it for business, it's a full-time job on its own, and you're trying to squish that into everything else. Having the right mindset about anything, and just by learning, once you're setting up your working on your mindset about one area, then that branches to another area, and that branches to the area, and then you're becoming more and more, so we call it wise, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you're becoming more and more the person that you really want to be. You're stepping into the version of yourself that you originally wanted to be, and maybe were a little bit dubious about whether you could become that, and you do become that. And the wonderful thing is, then as you're becoming that, you realize that there are new levels of yourself that you can become too. And I think the whole part of human existence is to become the best version of you that you can be. And it's interesting because you also mentioned about how to make sure that you're running your property business as a business. And part of that is also a mindset thing. So I've met many people in business, and obviously I come from a business background, and then I've got into property. I've not gone into property and then tried to make that a business. But I meet a lot of people that are really passionate about property, but they're not looking at things as a business, and it becomes very emotive. And we've talked a lot about making sure that you're embracing your emotions. And it's really interesting because now this is like making sure that you are not paying attention to your emotions. So let's say, for example, you have a property deal. I met a lady that said that she'd put in a tenure. So, this is when it like kind of goes secret envelope type stuff. And then got really disappointed because she'd missed out on the deal, and it was like such a minimal amount that she'd missed out on. I can't quite remember. It's something like maybe £500 to £1,000, for example. And she's like, well, maybe I should have put in a higher offer. My response to that is, as a property investor, as a property expert, you know your numbers. Your numbers are your numbers. So it doesn't matter if someone else goes in and puts in a higher number than you and they get it, because your numbers are what works. If you put in a higher offer, you're compromising on your numbers. That's becoming emotional, not logical. And when it comes to this type of thing, this is where we don't want to pay attention to a lot of our emotions. As human beings, we want to win. That's like, especially if we like something, we like the look of it, we like the idea of turning this ugly duckling into this beautiful swan or whatever it happens to be, we become emotional about that. And so when it comes to this, we want to stick to the logical. You want to know your numbers, and your numbers will always be your best friend, whether it comes down to your marketing. So knowing how many leads you need to be able to get, knowing what your lead conversion is, knowing how much it's going to cost for that lead acquisition, this type of thing. These type of numbers are paramount to like business success. But I can speak to a lot of people and I'll be like, right, how many leads do you need to be able to get a new client? Whether that's getting a new investor, whether that is getting a new property or attracting a new property, whether that is putting in another deal, whether that's having the backup for your team, like how many people do you need to speak to be able to get, or how many people do you need to trial out to have got to your perfect team? Like all of these numbers as you're going along your business are really important, because you'll have the most perfect team at one point, You know, when you've literally got the dream team, you've got the great solicitors, you've got the conveyancers, you've got all your tradespeople, and you are like rocking it, and you're like, yes. And then one of them retires, moves, does something, and you're like, oh, now I've got to replace that person. Yeah. It happens though. Yeah. And so you've then got to go through that process again. And if you don't have those numbers, it can seem like it's overwhelming. It can seem like things are taking forever. Or what can happen, let's say we take this from a marketing perspective, and let's say that you've decided that you've got a marketing budget, I don't know, let's say a marketing budget of £500. If you've not worked out your numbers beforehand, you could go and spend that £500 and feel like you've not really got anything. But if you've worked out how many leads you need, what the lead conversion is going to be, and then what the acquisition of that, and then what the lifetime value of a client's going to be, for example, that £500 might have just needed to be 550, or it might have even just needed to be 501. Or do you see what I mean? It's like you could have, it's like that image, you know, when that guy is like mining for the diamonds and he's like so close, and then he's like, yeah. Then quits and goes away. So yeah, your numbers and how you're conducting your business in property is really important. But what I see is people getting to the juicy stuff, the sexy stuff, which is the looking for the properties and then getting the excited. But you even want to get this down to almost a fine art. And these are all working on averages. So eventually what you'll know is you'll need to look at so many properties before you find the right kind of one that you want to put in a deal for, whether you are sourcing and trading properties for other people or doing them for yourself. And then when you know that, you also then know how much work you're going to need to put in. Then guess what? You're going to know how much time that's going to be able to take. Now, time management is a really important part. And you mentioned this right at the very beginning. I do have 5 children. I also have 5 businesses. And so being able to manage my time and all of those businesses, I don't get it right. Very rarely get it right. I'm always feeling like I'm juggling. But what I do know is I do know that this amount of time equals this amount, and this amount of time equals this amount. And then if I get interrupted because there's too many things that I'm working on the business, inside the business, not on the business, then I know that it's going to cost me in the end. So where am I going to make up that time? And if you can really look at your property journey and start to drill down on all of these what we call basics in business, your property journey will eventually be so much better. And it's the same for refurbs. You know, we talk about cookie cutter refurbs. Eventually you'll know all of those kind of numbers. You'll know if it's this type of house, it's going to cost this amount of money. You want to look at that methodology, but use it for everything else within your business as well.
Fantastic, exactly. So that's amazing tips from you, Traci. As always, you are absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Now, I always ask, what would be your on that topic? Yeah, what would be like your top 3 tips? What would you say?
So top 3 tips would be to know where you're going. So that's like knowing your goals, your vision, and that type of thing. You have to have a destination. If you don't have a destination, you'll end up somewhere. It just might not be where you want to be. So that's definitely the number one. The next one is to break that down. But if you break it down in terms of numbers, as what does your ideal life cost? And then you work that backwards. And so you go, if my ideal life means that I need £20,000 a month, then how much business do I need to do? And if you do all those numbers that I mentioned before, you'll be able to work that out. So that's number 2. So number 1 is knowing your destination, your goals, your visions. Number 2 is breaking that down, but specifically into numbers, because that's like almost like a consistent. And then number 3 is taking action. And when you're taking that action, know that you're going to have negative times and positive times. But if you can become the neutral observer within those actions, you're always going to be able to move forward in some kind of capacity. So that would be my top 3 tips.
Fantastic. Love it. What sort of books would you recommend to our listeners? Even if it's like, it doesn't, let me ask you first. Do you read books or do you listen to them?
I do both. So I used to be an avid reader, and then I had 5 children, and that became a lot less. And so Audible became my best friend. Probably the most, there's a number of books that I really recommend, and it will really depend on which different methodology that you'll actually have. So probably one of the best books that I read that made a massive change to me was The Slight Edge, and that's by Jeff Olson. So The Slight Edge talks about doing things, like small things but consistently. Beforehand I was an all or nothing person, and I cannot tell you how much that cost me in terms of business time and everything else. Whereas doing smaller things consistently definitely works. So for those people that say, I don't have time to read, this book tells you just read 10 pages of book a night before you go to bed.
Yeah.
And then you'll have still read all those books. So really, really good life-changing book. Another one that I really like is actually Oprah Winfrey's What I Know for Sure. And this is like snippets from all the different people that she has interviewed and also experiences that she's had. It's a really eye-opening book. For business, it would probably be, gosh, there's quite a few. Probably Jack Canfield's, I think it's at 66 Steps to Success or something like that. He's a really, really good book of how things are broken down. Anything from Brian Tracy, from a sales perspective and a marketing perspective, really, really good. From Audible, gosh, there's again so many. One of the best ones I've listened to is a really small book, very, very short, and it's How to Make Your Bed, and that's by Admiral. Oh, I might have to look that one up. Admiral W something or other. Right, I'm going to try and find this one. But the part about making your bed is the fact that if you make your bed in the morning, you've always got something that you've like, it's the first win of the day, basically. But the Audible book, he also goes a lot more in depth into a speech that he did that became very, very well known. And he also talks about his experiences, which I'm just going to tell you that if you've not listened to the book before, there's going to be a point that you're going to be like, oh, it's going to really get to you. Admiral William McRaven, there we go. So really, really, really like that one. I also like Rocket Fuel. Rocket Fuel is a really good book if you want to find out what your personality is and who you need to work with in business. That's quite eye-opening. There's a lot, so you can tell that I read and listen a lot.
I'm gonna wait for my Audible credit to top up. And I have, this is one of my favorite things about this podcast is that I get always really good book recommendations, and
Yeah.
I never ever struggled what book to buy when I get a new credit ever. I actually have so many books in a wish list because all my exciting guests, you come up with such amazing books, and there's only very rarely they cross, you know what I mean? There's always some sort of new book recommendation. So yeah, I absolutely love it. So thank you very much for this recommendation.
You're welcome.
I'll definitely add that to my wish list. I still haven't even started the book recommended by Jamie York, who was on this podcast. It was like 3 episodes ago or something. And the reason is because I started with what's the name? Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And because I don't drive that much anymore, as I used to go to work and all that, I don't listen to the books that often. And having as I used to, and a 24-hour book, and it's just taking me weeks and weeks and weeks to finish. So it's like when before you have 5-6 hours book, and I would just get it done within a week. Now I'm literally stuck with one book for so long, which is
it's really hard, and I completely empathize with that, because it's always in the car when I listen to my children will turn around to me occasionally and go, Mum, please, this time can we actually listen to music? But one of the things that I have adapted to because of COVID is I get our Alexa to read my books. And so when I've got time, like let's say that I've just got paperwork to do, or an appointment's been cancelled, then I will just get it to read my current Audible. But yeah.
Thank you, Tracy, very, very much. That's absolutely amazing recommendations. I love new recommendations for the books, especially for someone who I feel inspired by every day.
Thanks.
Very much. And I also ask every of my guests if they have something to recommend to watch. So it could be mindset, property, or anything else. And it could be a documentary, it could be a TV show, anything what, let's say, helped you with your mindset, anything like that, anything you have to recommend.
Do you know, it's really interesting because I very rarely watch television. Very, very rarely. I don't even really watch that many documentaries, but that's purely because I tend to work a lot in the evenings, I know. But if there's something that I've watched, in fact, there's two things that I watched that made a profound difference in my life that I've then rewatched a number of times since. And the first one is The Secret. And it was interesting because I was a law of attraction coach for a long time. I studied under a law of attraction coach in Canada. I've traveled all the way to Canada to do that back in 2008, 2000. It might have been actually 2008. So The Secret made a really, really big difference. And also, What the Bleep Do We Know? And those are two probably film type documentary-ish type things that I've watched on a regular basis. And every time I do, you know, there's something that reminds me. Remember when I said to you earlier in the podcast that there's things that we know that we should do, but we just don't do them. And every time I watch those, I kind of get reminded. I almost feel like I plug back in just to that part of reinvigorating that knowledge of knowing how to be and what I'm striving for. And also for me personally, it's about thinking bigger, because the upbringing that I had, the programming, if you like, was so much about keeping me small all the time that every now and again I'll have this like wobble where I think, oh, maybe I'm thinking too big, maybe I'm like being too greedy, maybe I'm like, you know, when all of that kind of starts to happen and you talk yourself out of it. And I can watch something like that and I'll be like, nope, I'm all good.
And what's the name of this one?
Sorry, what's that?
What was the name of that program you said, the last one?
What the Bleep Do We Know? So there's The Secret and What the Bleep Do We Know? And What the Bleep Do We Know is really fascinating. They talk a lot about the experiment when they did with water, where they taped different words and had different intention to water, and then when they froze that water they saw the molecular structure of what happened to it. And if there was like negativity, then there was all these like really kind of harsh geometric parts, but when they said anything that was really positive or loving, it was these really kind of beautiful shapes. And they also have the experiment in there with the plant. So they have one plant, where they like talk really negatively to it and they see what happens, and then the other one where they talk positively to it. I mean, it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating.
Absolutely love it. We had coincidentally that friend I mentioned before, Julia. She had birthday on Friday, and one of her friends, she bought her a planter speaker. Because we love plants and we love music, obviously, and Julia didn't have her Bluetooth speaker yet, so she got her little planter speaker. We never even heard of it, and she bought it because it made her smile. She was like, I've never seen this, you know, there you go. And as when we arrived and we're setting it up, and I said to Julia, I was like, you're not listening to any crazy negative heart, you know, some sort of music with because I said to her, like, with your music, I bet the flower's gonna flourish. And we were talking about it. I said to her, like, imagine having that different, you know, some sort of negative horrible music compared to like her, you know, like a little Rocky and Paolo Nutini and about love and all this. I bet your plant is gonna be so happy there.
It does. I mean, it's fascinating. It goes into the science of it. I'm a massive fan of Dr. Bruce Lipton as well. He's the person that wrote The Biology of Belief, first person that really discovered that your DNA could change and that you weren't really your DNA, and also what happened to cells when he has petri dishes, and he could put a healthy cell in a petri dish next to cancerous cells that were also in a petri dish, and that cell would then start to become cancerous. And he could take a cancerous cell, just one, and put it into next to a petri dish of healthy cells, and then that cancerous cell became healthy. It's, again, a really, really fascinating part. Anything, as you can probably tell, with mindset and understanding about maybe even quantum physics, but the biology of what makes us us, anything to do with that fascinates me completely. As you can probably tell, I'm quite passionate about that.
And it's like when you and I meet as well, it's the same thing. Like we can just chat and chat and chat and even before this episode, we were chatting longer prior recording than now on the actual episode, because we can, we're both very passionate about this sort of mindset and power of thoughts and law of attraction and all that. And I started a new masterclass online, and it's with like they're like basically lots of different master classes, let's call it. And because I'm going to be writing a book, there's a master classes about how to create characters, how to write drama, how to write comedy, and then I want my book to be a movie one day. So I'm going to be looking at the master classes about about movie making and all that, just so I can have the just so I have sort of idea when I'm typing my book. Anyway, the reason
awesome.
one of the first one I started to listen to was, without doubt, was Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely is the first female self-made billionaire. So it's like this woman, it's obviously you want to know, if when she speaks, you want to listen, basically.
Yes.
But why I'm mentioning is her, is that until I always admired her, but I'm one of those people that I don't know much about famous people. Which in a way it's good, because I'm not interested about knowing who sleeps with who and who's got a baby with who and who's got a car, and like that doesn't bother me at all. But what I actually do want to start knowing more about people is like her, for example, and I just want to know a little bit more. And the reason why I'm saying it is because I always admired her, but I never knew that she is very, very spiritual. And I just, by doing this masterclass, I found out that she is a huge power of attraction believer and law of attraction, power of thoughts. And I never knew that. And the way even how she's explaining things, and I'm like, this is amazing. She is so like, do you know what I mean? It's like even someone you admire so much didn't even know.
Yes.
That. And then I realized, and I'm like, that's amazing. Just another proof that this stuff works as well. Like this.
Oh, massively. And do you know what? Over the last 10, 15 years, the amount of people that feel that they can also express that. I mean, to be beforehand, so many people would think it was too woo-woo, or you would like there was like this such defined part that if you spoke about business, it was like hard kind of business and factual, and we didn't bring any kind of emotion or any kind of spiritual or any of that type of stuff into it. And I love the fact that it's now more spoken about more openly, because these are the differences. These are the differences between those people that make it and those people that feel that they're always so close and then something happens. A lot of people don't realize that it's often their self-sabotaging behaviors, and it goes with the whole thing. So the law of attraction talks a lot about the fact that your thoughts bring about things, but of course there's a lot more to it. It's about the actions that you take. But let's just say that you have decided that you've been inspired by this podcast, which if you have, thank you very much. And that actually you are now going to follow your dreams, and that maybe you wanted to get into property and now you've decided, yeah, actually, you know what, I'm going to do that. Let's say that you have that, you start having those thoughts and you start attracting the right people to you and the right information to you. But then your programming that you've had before is like, oh, but I can't do anything new, and I'm not going to be able to make it successful. Then it kind of stops it in its tracks. And then you think that because it stopped it in its tracks, that's proof that it's not for you and it's not kind of right and that type of thing. Whereas actually it's not. It's the fact that we need to push through. And that's what I was talking about, that there's this kind of gap where you need to push through the old limiting beliefs that you may not have even realized that were there. And a lot of people will talk about gut feelings, and gut feelings are very, very important, but there's also a gut feeling which stops you. That's that brain intervention that's like, oh, don't do this, it's a little bit scary, and if you do this you could fail and it's all going to go wrong, and let me protect you from that. Whereas actually staying where you are, the result of that, and you don't want to be there, so you're going to have to jump that hurdle. And if there's anything that we can get across in this podcast, it would be that it's the fact that it's not just having the thoughts that will bring about the things that you want. It's about the fact that you have to take the action, and some point in that journey, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but you need to get through that.
Well, what is the saying? There is a saying, isn't it, that nothing good comes from being comfortable, or something like that, isn't it? Yeah, like which makes you feel uncomfortable, but in a good way. The things what like public speaking. So public speaking, for those who don't know, is that it's the biggest fear people have. People are more scared of public speaking than dying, and these are the facts that are actually, the statistics in the world.
Yes.
That people are genuinely incredibly scared of public speaking more than anything else, but it's just one of those that but you seeing people speaking publicly out there, like, it's not gonna hurt you. It's not gonna hurt you. And there's so many positives comes with it, and once you just try. Do you see what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, I'm about to speak on the event in December, and I go like, as well, I was like, oof, speaking publicly, but thinking it's like, it have to be done. It have to be done in order for me to grow, because I'll never change anything I'm doing now. How can I become the person who I'm not now? Do you see what I mean? Like in order to become who you want to be, you need to build some new skills. You need to try new things.
Yes.
You need new things. So if I just stay as I am, I don't think I'll get there, or at least not that soon. So it's very, very important. You try new things. You keep and just work on that mindset, and work on the skills, and do things what makes you feel uncomfortable in order to be.
Absolutely. And even public speaking, I'll often say to people, it's just a conversation. If you start thinking, same with people that want to do lives on social media and find that they're feeling nervous about that, it's just a conversation. And if you can also have that relaxed thought process, along with the fact that the information that you're about to share is more important than the fear of you sharing it. Because the reason that we want to share information is because we hope that we can make an impact. And if you make an impact on one person, that's all you need. It's not reaching thousands and thousands of people. If you do, fantastic. But really, the mindset should be, you're just helping one person. And if I could help one person that's had an upbringing like mine to have a mindset that I've managed to achieve and to go on to follow your dreams, oh my gosh, that in itself, that's worth more than any kind of financial reward that you could possibly ever have. Not sharing that information and seeing someone stay stuck, that genuinely hurts me. It really hurts when I see someone like that, because I just think you don't need to be there. So if you can understand that the information that you have to share is really important, and it just needs to reach one person. Whereas the fear comes in when you're going to stand in front of all of these people, and what if I mess up? Well, what if you do? Exactly. You're just having a conversation. If you forget your lines, guess what? Turn around and go, I've just had a complete and utter mind blank. We're all human beings, and the more human that you are rather than robotic, exactly, then the more people warm to you anyway.
And maybe it's something to do as well that maybe some people, they have a bad experience from when they're little, and then they meet girls, they laughed at them or something at school, and you have that fear. It's like, oh my gosh, public speaking is terrible, I make a mistake, people laugh at me. But because that's what you had to do, at least where I'm from, as a school thing, you had to stand up in front of the class and speak about your work or things like that. Like, we had to do it as children. And why we are not then more ready for being public speakers if we had to do it at school? There must be some sort of memory in there, or something. People laugh at you, or because you are a child, you pick a topic which you're interested in, but the other mean kids, they're not. And it could be, isn't it? Like, I never thought of it. It's actually the first time I'm thinking about it, to be fair. As now, it's the first time thinking about it. But it could be that people could have a bad memory of some people laughing. And that's where they're like, I don't want to do public speaking. People are going to laugh at me. But even if that is the case,
exactly,
understand that being an adult, it's different, isn't it? Because people as adults, we still judge. I mean, people still are judgmental, but they're not mean judgmental as much as children sometimes, if that makes sense. At school, you can have more.
And also, when you're a child, you're learning a subject because you have to.
Yeah.
When you are doing public speaking, you're talking about a subject you're passionate about and that you know about. Like the reason I always get nervous when I go up, before I go on stage, I always have that like feeling that I'm going to be sick. But as soon as I'm on the stage and as soon as I start talking, I'm absolutely fine. But that's also because I know my subject. So if I did lose track, it doesn't really matter. I know my subject. If someone asks me a question, I know my subject. And if they're going to ask me a question I don't know the answer to, I'm a human being. I can go, actually, that's a really great question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
You know, that those are like the worst things that can kind of happen. Again, it would be that programming. There's also a part about being comfortable in your own skin. And I think that also comes with that part that we've been talking about throughout the podcast of being that neutral observer and finding you. We've talked very much about it's all about you. It's not what other people's perceptions of you are or opinions of you are that you then become what they expect. No, you become what you expect of you and what you want from you. And when you can do that, when you can be completely comfortable in your own skin, it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks, says, or does, because that's you understand that they're coming from a place of whatever their issues are, if it feels like it's attacking or negative, which is what most people's fear is. But when you become comfortable in your own skin, you're also comfortable with calling that out for somebody and going, that's really interesting. Where's that coming from for you? Where's that fear coming from you? And then calling that out is also really powerful for them. They might not like it, but it's a powerful gift that you can give to them too.
Exactly. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Traci. That was really I really enjoyed this episode. It was so informative. It was so full of golden nuggets. It was full of tips. I believe that every single person who's going to be listening to this episode is going to learn a lot. There's so much.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this chat. Traci, can you just tell us
Me too.
how people can find you when they want to find you?
So luckily you'll find me by my name, as Traci is Traci and Cornelius is Cornelius. You'll find me on different social medias. For property, you'll find us under Glade Property. We have Glade Property Lettings and Management, Glade Property Network, Glade Property Investments. Type in Glade Property, you'll find us.
Fantastic. I'll put it on the video for the YouTube channel and obviously for the podcast as well. I'll let you know when it's going to be coming live. I'm very excited to share this with the world. Because as I said, I said it many times, but you are very inspirational, and I'm very lucky to call myself your friend. So thank you so much for coming on the show as well. Really
neutral
show today. What a great chat. And as I said, we were now pretty much equally chatting as long as we've been recording, even prior to and I bet that we can chat for more hours, you know. With a day.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. And as I said, you are absolute star and absolute legend. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Traci.
Bye.